So I have another spotlight for y'all. Larry Elder coming right up. So Larry Elder, the Eldorado, the sage of the South, one of my most favorite people in the world. As a matter of fact, if you make a list of my top 10 favorite people in the world, he'd be number one, no doubt about it. And that's a hell of a list, so that's saying something. And I have to say for Larry Elder, I have to say he's probably the source for a good bit of a lot of the information. A lot of statistical data that I cite, I got from him. You know, the majority, if not all, of the studies that I quote from and cite from, I got it from him. And I can see it. I've heard many people say this. Many people that I'm huge fans of, where I respected in my eye. Now I've heard, Brandon Tatum say he got information from Larry Elder, say the same thing. Candace Owens. I've heard ABL. So many people that I've heard say they've gotten so much of their data from Larry Elder, and I can personally say for me that is absolutely true. Now, there's been so many memorable moments with Larry Elder because he's a lawyer, right? First of all, lawyer, talk show host in Los Angeles. He's conservative, like me, and again, so many of the views that he expressed, I just align with because I'm a person all about logic and reason, common sense, logic, and reason, and Larry Elder is just straight up common sense, logic, and reason, and fact, and evidence, and data. Now, there's been so many memorable moments of him. Now, one of them, those in particular, was when he was on the Dave Rubin show. Dave Rubin interviewed him, and Dave Rubin started with the race hustling, the systemic racism, the police brutality, and Larry Elder wasn't having it. He wasn't having any bit of it. He smacked the nonsense down. He smacked basically Dave Rubin senseless. And I think he's personally responsible for the fact that Dave Rubin is now a libertarian who used to be a somewhat moderate. Well, he's straight libertarian now because of Larry Elder and because of that smackdown, or which he acknowledged on the second interview that he did with Larry Elder. And not just him, but I also heard other people such as Candace Owens. She said that was a profound moment in her. When she was in the point of making her transformation from being a liberal leftist, which she started out as, and now she's a conservative. She said that was a pivotal moment for her. So, getting big ups to Larry Elder for that, And another moment that I think is profound that he often talks about is when he had a he spoke with the Ohio State players. Now, then Coach Urban Meyer asked Larry Elder to speak, and he generally had speakers to speak to his football players because he felt that so many coaches, use the players up, and they send them out in the world with no knowledge, no ability to deal in the world. And part of, you look at the NFL, that stat that something like 80% of the players go broke and bankrupt 2 to 3 to 4 years after retiring, because a lot of these guys are growing up in poor, impoverished areas in the hood, never been around money, knows how to operate, handle money, and you put money in their hands, and that's a dangerous thing. So Urban Meyer would have people come to speak to a student because he wants them to be well-rounded and knowledge. And he told Larry Elder that he had a speaker come who was a pro-black, systematic white supremacy, all the other nonsense, and he wanted to give him a different perspective. Well, he went and spoke to the players, and he said that at the beginning, many of them were folding their hands in disagreement, but by the end of it, he said when it was over, a lot of those players came to him and told him, well, he gave him something to think about. Why? Well, because he spoke the facts. He spoke the data, the studies that they probably never heard. All that they heard all their life is race hustling and systematic white supremacy, all the race hustles, but he gave them evidence and study and data that they never heard. Something that, again, he does with most people. But then that's Larry Elder for you. Now, another memorable moment that he talks about often was this poem that he heard when he was in school, when he was a young man. And this was a poem about the the guy, the person who, a black guy, a child who was a vacationing in Baltimore, some white person who was also a kid, a child, called him a nigger, and that's all he could think about. So the whole class, and including Larry Elder, were angry, and he went home and told his mother the poem. So this had to be in the late 60s, early 70s, I would say. And he told the poem to his mom, and his mom was like, it was a shame that that black kid let something so trivial ruin his vacation. And again, we talking about back then in the day when you can say, okay, here's some evidence of how system is against black people. That's not really happening today. But even back then, she had words of wisdom. Another profound story that speaks volumes of so many blacks in America is when he talks about his friend Perry, right? Now, Perry was Larry Elder's friend growing up. They grew up in the same neighborhood, and he envied Perry a lot because Perry was the best athlete that they knew. He was the best athlete in the school, and it always was the case, them growing up. It didn't matter what the sport was, football, basketball, track, tennis, whatever it is, Perry was good at it. Unfortunately, Perry had a terrible attitude. And that attitude was allowed to fester because people gave him a pass because he was such an athlete. Larry talks about how, when they were kids in elementary school and they were playing kickball, nobody wanted to select Perry because he talked trash. He just had a bad attitude. But Larry gave up his spot because he thought he was the best athlete, and the teacher agreed, right? And then another story talks about how Perry, with his bad attitude, repeatedly showed up late to football practice, and the coach gave him a free pass. But one day the coach checked him on it, threw his equipment down, and left practice. And the coach started in the next game because he wanted to win. However, coach had to tell all the recruiters, the college coaches who were recruiting him, they had to tell him the truth. That he was as Larry Elder put it, a coach killer. He had a bad attitude, didn't listen, can disrupt the locker room. And there were a lot of Division I coaches recruiting him, looking for him, and I believe Notre Dame was one. And we talking about the Notre Dame back then, that was a huge deal. As a result of this, nobody recruited him, nobody wanted to sign him because of the attitude. He had to go to a Division I school, and his attitude just grew, and he's just been a angry, bitter person ever since then. Race hustling. Larry said he changed his name to one of those ridiculous Muslim names that these black folks do, saying that Christianity is a white man's religion, but Islam is supposed to be the black man's religion, though. And he saw one day, Larry saw his friend Perry race hustling to a bunch of kids out there, and Larry wasn't having it. He told Perry, hey, we grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same school with the same teachers. So you could have had the same outcome I had, but you had an issue. So Larry wasn't having that, and he also talks about how Perry was the only kid he knew who didn't have a father, and it's amazing how back then it was such a rarity, but now it's like the norm, and we continue to ignore nonsense like this for race hustling. But it's just profound to show you the impact that fathers have. Now, another story, I have to say probably the most profound story that he talks about is the one about the relationship between him and his father. I've heard Larry give this speech many a time, talk about this many times, and it never gets old. But he talks about how growing up, him and his brothers, they hated their father, they couldn't stand him because he was always angry, mad, unpredictable. They didn't know what made him mad. One day something would set him off, the next day it wouldn't. So they didn't know, and they just hated their father because of this, and he feared his father. Now his dad opened up a restaurant, and he saved his money and opened up a restaurant. His brothers used to work in it, and he paid them money and tips. And he used to yell at him all the time, and Larry did not like the fact that his father yelled at him. And he said that one day, he said, if the father yells at me, he was just going to walk out and leave. And, well, his father yelled at him, and he just walked out and left. A crowded restaurant. When his father came home, took the money and the tips that he paid him, threw at him, and they didn't speak for 10 years. Amazing. And he said, and it's not, they didn't say anything to each other, nothing and not a word. Well, 10 years later, when Larry was 25 or so, there was some unresolved issue with between him and his father. So he decided to make an unannounced trip to Los Angeles. He was in Cleveland at the time, working as a lawyer, and he was going to go and tell his father a piece of his mind, and his father was going to call him an ungrateful son. It was going to be roughly about a 5-minute conversation, but it was going to be, it's going to be over then and that, and it was going to be resolution. Well, it turned out quite different, right? They talked for 8 hours, and of course, this is the inspiration for the book that he wrote. Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, and in that 8 hours, Larry learned about his father's past that was never spoken about. We learned about how his father, at the age of 13, left his mother's home because he got into a quarrel, an argument with the then boyfriend, and the woman sided with the boyfriend, so he left home at the age of 13, never to return. And just his story, living in the real segregated South, the real Jim Crow that so many other blacks today complain and cry about, but they've never seen. Now, his father, told them and taught his sons, raised his sons to say, hey, life is what you get out of it. If you put something into it, you got to get something out of it. You don't put anything into it, you won't. There's going to be bad things that happen to you, but how him and his brothers responded will let the father and the mother know if they raise a man or not. So even despite all of what this father went through, and if you, like I said, I'll put a link in the description to the video if you want to see it. I believe most people probably have heard that story already. But despite all of that, here he is still believing that America is a great country, that you can go out there and achieve whatever you want, but you got to put in the effort. And this is what so many black people refuse to do. The only effort that so many blacks want to put in is being victims. Well, you're not going to get anything being a victim. It just simply ain't going to happen. Nobody wants to hear that, though. Anyway, but this has been my spotlight on Larry Elder. And if I could say anything to him, I would say, hey, keep up the good work. Keep speaking the truth. Keep smacking fools down. And if they don't want to hear truth, well, hell, that's on them. You can't do anything about it, but all you can do is just speak truth. And as the Bible said, hey, bring the truth to people. They don't want to hear it. Kick the dust off your heel and bring it to the next group of people. But anyway, thanks, Larry Elder, for everything you've done for me and for everyone else, including, say, people like Candace Owens. I think he's the reason why we have a Candace Owens on our side, no doubt about it. And it's because of the work that he's done, as well as other people. I think that America's going to be all right, y'all. But anyway, like I said, this is my spotlight to Larry Elder. And as always, y'all, until next time.